It all starts Saturday at 4:30. Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 8.5 here at home. Haven't played since Christmas, the starters. Obviously, they played during Week 18. But Mahomes, Kelce, Hopkins, Chris Jones was injured on Christmas, so he hasn't played for a while. But some of these guys have not played for a while going up against the Houston Texans. Over-under, just 41.5 per our friends at FanDuel.
Yeah, in part, presumably because of the cold, but also because two good defenses. It's supposed to be under 20 degrees temperature-wise in this game, so that always, cold weather creates low-scoring games generally. And obviously we saw what the Texans defense can do a week ago against the Chargers. So, that's the side of the ball that is expected to be good for Houston. And Kansas City's defense is really good. I saw Bobby giving interviews about how you're supposed to deal with a guy like Chris Jones, particularly with an offensive line like theirs. And he's like, look, when you get to this level, all the defenses are good. Reasonable point.
He didn't have a better answer than that?
No, I mean, he was talking about how, you got to be aware of where Chris Jones is, give him help, blah, blah, like the usual stuff. But then he was like, look, Chris Jones is a great player, Spag's a great coach, but you get to this level, they're all good.
Yeah. I mean, Kansas City also at this point, they had one player kind of limited at practice, Mecole Hardman, and that's it.
Well, this is the benefit of resting everybody.
Yes.
You get healthy.
So, once again, I mean, look, I'm not trying to diminish anything from Kansas City the last couple of years. But remember in the wild card round last year against Miami was pulling street free agents to rush the passer in that game against Kansas City. Buffalo was completely depleted on the defensive side of the ball. Meanwhile, Kansas City, yes, they lost Rashee Rice earlier in the year, but they made a move to essentially replace him with DeAndre Hopkins, not like for like, but pretty impact player. Kansas City, while everyone else is falling apart, is getting healthier than ever. In part because of the rest, but in part just because of the way the timing was on some of those injuries, having Marquise Brown come back later in the year, and now Jalen Warren coming back. Watson.
Yeah, they're getting healthier, and they've been looking better as well. You have to throw away, obviously, the Week 18 game where they rested everybody and they got waxed by almost 40 points by Denver. But the last time we saw them for real, the last time we saw the starters was that Christmas game against Pittsburgh where they looked like a complete class above. The game before that, they were looking pretty good against this Houston team. The game before that was against Cleveland. The last few games, Kansas City has started to look more like playoff Kansas City, and they've been getting healthier, and they're rested. If you were Houston, you'd be pretty nervous coming into this game.
Yeah, so I would say, what does playoff Kansas City look like? What could change even a little bit from the regular season? We saw elements of it probably in the Texans game before Christmas, in the Steelers game at Christmas, like you mentioned. But does Travis Kelce, with a month off, pick up half a step again? He's been a guy that is still able to get open, but averaging 8.5 yards per catch this year, 0 after the catch ability. But will he be able to bring some of that back with a little bit of rest? DeAndre Hopkins wants a ring. Is he going to show up, moss some people at the catch point? I think that's in the range of outcomes. This offense has looked more versatile with Marquise Brown out there and the way they've moved Xavier Worthy out there. So now it is a pretty nice, bunch of receivers here between Xavier Worthy's speed, DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, his speed, Kelce, who could still get open, and of course Mahomes running the whole thing. And then defensively, how many times have we said, hey, Chris Jones, game on the line, is going to line up outside, line up inside, whatever it is. He still has as many quick wins that just blow up plays as any defensive lineman in the NFL. The other factor with Jalen Watson coming back, if there was a weakness in Kansas City's defense, it was cornerback 2. When Watson went down the second half of the year, having guys like Nazeeh Johnson filling in. Well, Watson's back out there. They get to play that tight, press man coverage that they like to play with Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson on the outside. So Kansas City, fully loaded and ready to go. My question is, okay, if there is a little bit of rust, right? If there is a little bit of rust, can Houston take advantage of that and maybe get up early and have a chance to pull the upset?
The big thing for the Chiefs is this ability to just turn on playoff football. I think Mahomes is the most obvious example of a player that's able to do that. Kelce did it last year as well. But Mahomes consistently throughout his NFL career has been able to just go, okay, it's the playoffs now. I'm going to play even better. And this has not been a vintage Patrick Mahomes season at all. And last season wasn't either.
Last 2 regular seasons, he's been by most
human.
By most metrics, 10th, 12th, 8th, somewhere in that range in either the last 2 years.
Like Mahomes in the regular season for the most of his career has looked like the best quarterback in the NFL, and then in the playoffs has been the same guy. The last couple of years, I don't think he's been quite as good in the regular season. This year in particular, I don't think he's been anywhere near as good as he's been previously. And okay, obviously that comes with the caveats of look at the receiving core the last couple of years, where last year it was a real problem, and then Rashee Rice kind of rescued it towards the end of the year and into the playoffs. This year, similar kind of thing. It's been a problem. Nico Hopkins has come in. Hollywood Brown's been out. He's come back. Like, there are reasons why it might happen again. But the big difference to me, so you look at his career, regular season versus playoffs, the grades are very similar. His grade is slightly better in the regular season at PFF than it is in the postseason. The biggest difference, though, and this I think you can see in his postseason play, the big thing that changes is he simply stops making mistakes in the playoffs. Like, whatever focuses him or concentrates him, once it gets real, once there's no safety net anymore, Mahomes simply stops making errors. And that shows up most in turnover-worthy plays, where generally in his career, he's reasonably prone to them. He's not like Josh Allen prone to them. He's not, some of the most turnover-worthy prone quarterbacks in the NFL. But for a guy that, is working on a case to be the greatest quarterback of all time, puts the ball in harm's way, more than some other guys do. So his career regular season turnover-worthy play rate is 2.7%. Just fine, not spectacular. His career postseason turnover-worthy play rate is 1.7%. So he goes from like middle of the pack to basically the best quarterback in the NFL in terms of not putting the ball in harm's way. And remember, there's a chunk of that time where he couldn't move. Like, he's hobbling around on a busted leg on a bad high ankle sprain and could barely run around. Like, this guy just simply stops making errors in the postseason. And when that happens, like, you've got his timing and his ability to pick up first downs with those scramble plays that we've talked about before, coupled with now you're probably not going to get a free one anywhere. It just becomes incredibly hard to beat him.
And honestly, I think that's been the story of the Chiefs this year. Remember, early in the year, Mahomes did have a bunch of interceptions, whether his fault or not. He cut down on those interceptions, and they just didn't make mistakes. And the reason why they ended up 15-1 with him as the starter is in the fourth quarter, you see other teams making mistakes, right? Not making that one play. How many times this year we said the Chiefs keep making that one play to win the game? So that's been their MO in the playoffs. I do want to, for all these teams, especially the heavy underdogs, paint a picture. How can Houston pull the upset here? Because they had the 4 interceptions last week on Justin Herbert. Defense was getting after it. They were rushing the passer, forcing those mistakes. They're going to need some of those in this game while also playing mistake-free on their side. In addition to, I think their stars have to play like stars. Stroud has to play a clean game, start to finish. Nico Collins probably has to take over, get 150 yards and a couple scores for Houston to be able to pull this off.
His playoff touchdown to interception ratio is now 41-8. Which is pretty impressive for the playoffs, which, again, playoffs where everything gets harder, where all the teams are good, where, everything is more difficult, and that's when Mahomes is able to actually scale up his performance.
So in that previous matchup, Texans were tied into the second half, and then the Chiefs pulled away. Remember, it was the great pass from C.J. Stroud to Tank Dell, that the play on which Tank Dell got injured, that got the Texans back into it. It has been more difficult for that pass game, or it's just difficult for that pass game to, not having, first off, no Stephon Diggs, no Tank Dell. Nico Collins has been special the last couple of years, which is why I'm saying he would have to potentially take over. I used to say when you're going up against this Chiefs offense, you want to slow the game and run it and steal possessions. Well, actually, the Chiefs started playing like that. And if you look at their style this year, they're the ones that shorten the game, have those 8 or 9 possession games, control the clock, long drives. They don't score a ton of points, but they don't give up a ton because the game's shortened. So honestly, that does technically work into the Texans' favor, the way the Chiefs have chosen to play offense this year, essentially not having explosives and controlling the clock. Tightens up the game a little bit, and now the Texans have to find a way to get a turnover. Could be a strip sack, whatever it might be. Will Anderson, Donnell Hunter, they have to find a way to steal a possession or two in this game.
Yeah, you feel like that defense needs to really come up with a couple of big plays to make this happen, because like their offense is just too banged up. It's too injured. It's too depleted from what it should have been if they'd had Stephon Diggs, if they had Tank Dell, if they had a healthy offensive line all season long. Remember the last game against Kansas City, that was the game where they lost Shaq Mason after a couple of snaps, and suddenly you're back to putting in one of the greens, Kendrick or Kenyon. And that's a downgrade, right? So they've been shuffling this offensive line all season long. It's been banged up, but it's also just not been good. There have been liabilities along it. They could, I think that the 5 that they had to start this game actually could have been an answer, right? With Blake Fisher at right tackle, with Shaq Mason at right guard, with Jarrett Patterson at center, Titus Howard at left guard, and then Tunsil at left tackle. That might have been the best 5 they are capable of putting out there. But then Shaq Mason goes down after 4 snaps, and you're back to putting in Kendrick Green at right guard, and it's a significant problem spot, particularly when you're going up against Chris Jones, who also has that ability to just be the game-wrecking force. So, the Texans' offensive line, I think, is the biggest weakness unit-wise, maybe in the playoffs. Their receiving core is so dependent now on Nico Collins because he's basically the only guy left that's a difference maker, which just puts so much pressure on C.J. Stroud. He just has less help than Mahomes.
Yeah, I agree. So, Houston's going to have to do something to mitigate Chris Jones. Again, I can't put enough emphasis on the way they want to play, too. Spags is also big game defensive coordinator, playoff defensive coordinator. You talk about playoff Mahomes. We're talking playoff DC here, too, in Spags, who always seems to dial up the right play at the right time, make the key third down stop. Whatever it might be, put Chris Jones in the right position. So it's what Kansas City's done forever. Nick Wright's calling it their last practice game. I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I think there's this opportunity here because of the way the schedule worked. 3.5 weeks off for Mahomes, like literally almost a month. I don't know if that's a factor at all because they rested in week 18 and the Christmas game was midweek. So it's a little extra time off. If there is a slow start for Kansas City for whatever reason, and Houston can hang in there in the second half, you say this, but those are also the games that Kansas City always finds a way to pull off in the fourth quarter. But that's Houston's best bet here. They need their stars to play like stars, and they have a bunch of them. Derek Stingley at corner, and the 2 pass rushers, and Will Anderson and Nadell Hunter. I do think that D-line can do some damage. I'm assuming Joe Thuney is going to play left tackle again.
Right.
And again, that's if
Even
we're
though, right, the last time we saw them, they were like it was all the backups, but DJ Humphries was out there getting back from his hamstring injury. Like that was the one theoretical starter that was out there getting in reps. Now maybe that was just he's now a backup, so he was the backup. But Humphries is still an option given the amount of time they've had off at left tackle.
This was the game that they moved Thuney out there to tackle, I believe, though, against Houston.
Yeah.
And then their offense got better.
But that was
the last 2 weeks.
When Humphries was hurt.
Oh, right. Yeah, I still think this has been their Mike Caliendo coming into guard and Joe Thuney getting out to left tackle. It does feel like they've solved that problem. Maybe Humphries is feeling better and looking
I don't know
good.
If they've solved it. That's been the best option that they've had, but all of the options have been bad. Like, I think theoretically a healthy DJ Humphries is still the best. Like, healthy DJ Humphries at left tackle and Joe Thuney at left guard is still the best combination that they can put out there. It's just that we haven't seen that, really, because Humphries only just got back from his major injury, then got a hamstring injury, and so he was rusty as hell and not playing well the first time he was out there, and then the second time he's coming back off a hamstring. We've basically not seen that version yet, and that would be a risky time to do it in the playoffs, to say, well, he's had the month off now, he should be healthy. Maybe healthy, but he's still rusty. I don't know if they will risk it. Like, I think that still has a theoretical higher upside than asking Joe Thuney to play left tackle and having a weakness at left guard. But I think they're most comfortable with that combination.
All right, man. Anything else from Houston's perspective to maybe advantages that they might have or ways that they can have success against Kansas City?
Well, that's one. Like, Joe Thuney, I think, is doing really well for a guard, but it's still a weakness at left tackle. Like, he can't block one-on-one either Janelle Hunter or Will Anderson Jr. They will have the advantage in that individual matchup.
He's been chipping and helping.
Exactly.
They also are scheming it up.
Of course.
Like, they know weakness in their protection.
They're not like we've got it solved. Joe Thuney's a top-end left tackle. Just leave him to it. They know they have to help him out. So that is a weakness. And not only that, but it creates a bigger weakness. Not a bigger weakness. It creates another weakness at left guard where Caliendo is a lot worse than Joe Thuney is. So you weaken two spots on the offensive line to make that shuffle happen and feel confident with it. And, there's nuance to it, right? I want to give credit to Joe Thuney for being a left guard and being able to hold his own at left tackle. There are very few players that can do that. Like I said, years ago, the Packers asked Josh Sitton to do that, who was like the best pass blocking guard in the game. And even he was like in over his head at left tackle, was able to just about cling on. It's a really difficult thing to do. And for him to be able to do it at all is incredibly impressive. But it is like the Texans will have a bullseye on that. They will know that is a huge area we can exploit. And at the very minimum, we're going to force them to put all that chip help and extra attention towards that spot, which opens up one-on-one matchups against Caliendo, which opens up one-on-one matchups on the other side of the offensive line because all the attention has to slide Thuney's way. The Texans' defensive line will feel good about that matchup.
So they might be able to get some pressure, maybe try to force some mistakes. Again, Mahomes generally pretty good at avoiding mistakes and avoiding sacks, negative plays overall. The matchups in the secondary, Kamari Lassiter had a great game last week, the rookie who ran 4.6. I highlighted this a few weeks ago too. The 4.6 hasn't shown up a ton. Doesn't matter. Dude's a good football player, but if he gets isolated on a Xavier Worthy, does that show up in this game? Derek Stingley. Stingley's great, as I mentioned the other day. Like, you throw a deep ball to him, he's got those ball skills and positioning and just feel to just turn those into turnovers. I don't think he's going to get challenged down the field, though. Anything in breaking, those types of things, he's not as good at. Again, I just think the Chiefs know the strengths and weaknesses and will attack properly. They're not just going to chuck a deep ball into Derek Stingley. So, what else before we make a pick here?
One of the biggest things, I think, is the Texans defense needs to find some way of bottling up Mahomes when it comes to those scrambles. Yeah. Like, he is so deadly with those.
I have more than 12.5 as his longest rush.
Right.
And he had a 15-yard touchdown that first matchup.
He's so good at those, and they are so devastating that you need to find a way of getting them off the field when you force him into those situations. He has 30 career playoff rushing first downs from scrambles alone, right? From just plays where he's just taken off and found a way of picking up a first down. You need to be able to figure out some way of stopping that, like whether it's spying him, whatever the solution is. Your defensive line might get pressure. That might not always be a good thing. Like, if they get pressure and it forces Mahomes out of the pocket and suddenly he's got open real estate in front of him, boom, first down. Well, net negative.
That's what's made them so tough, is right. It's like once you start winning pass rushes, Andy Reid always has a good feel for when you screen off of that, right? Oh, they're winning. Okay, we're going to soften up. We're going to screen behind it. Or, okay, you're winning. Okay, Mahomes going to navigate the pocket and, pick something up with his legs. Last thing to mention, Azeez Al-Shaair back, not there in that last matchup. And it's been huge, right? I mean, he's talked about green dot. They call him the heart and soul. Overall, just a very good player in the middle of the defense as well. And so Houston has an opportunity to be a little bit healthier. I mean, having more people on that side of the ball wasn't a health thing with Al-Shaair, but being more at full speed on that side of the ball here.
Yeah, I mean, I think having the guy that calls the plays on defense in the lineup is a significant needle mover. It's always tough trying to identify how much any one individual defender makes a difference to the unit, but I think that's. You can talk about elite pass rushers, elite cover guys. The guy that's calling the defense is probably a pretty significant guy to have out there.
Yeah, ultimately, I do worry about the Texans' offensive line. And if they could get Kansas City's really good on early down runs, I think it's going to be tough for Mixon runs to keep them on schedule. And once you get into second and third and long, I don't see this line holding up against Kansas City.
I mean, even against the Chargers, right? Like, it played fine. It was as good as it's been, but all of those guys gave up like multiple pressures. Blake Fisher, Jared Patterson, Titus Howard, Juice Scruggs, they all gave up multiple pressures in the game. None of them, graded particularly well from a pass blocking standpoint. And the Texans, were not generally in disadvantageous passing situations too much in that game. And none of them, the Chargers don't have a Chris Jones. Like Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, they're fine players, but they're not Chris Jones at this point. So it's getting harder. Like, the difficulty level is ramping up, and they're still not, that group is not where you want it to be. It is a weakness.
All right, man, let's make some picks. Kansas City by 8.5 Saturday afternoon, 4:30. Yeah.
I will go with Houston keeping it within 8.5, but losing.
Oh, I didn't get Harry's opinions here. I think he would go Kansas City.
Yeah.
He's a big favorite guy. I'll take Kansas City to cover the 8.5 here.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.